This is the bane of my existence. I love my house, but the biggest problem I have is when I built my house, I missed the sewer line by about 4 or 5 inches. And because of that, I have to pump my sewage out. So right now I'm in, my house is a 3-story house. It's called a double basement, and I'm in the second basement where my sewage pump right now is having a problem. Oh, I hate this. But anyway, so what's happening is down inside this tank, I have 2 sewage pumps, and basically as the sewage comes up, there's some floats that turn on the pumps, and it will pump the sewage up the line there. And what's happening is I believe this valve right here is bad, and so what's happening is it's pumping the sewage up, and then the pump turns off, and all the sewage flows back into the tank. So it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And apparently, from talking to my daughter, it's been happening throughout the night. So it's time to put on the extra long gloves and dive into it. Now, anyone who's a parent, I guess you get used to cleaning your baby's diapers, and this really isn't much different, except well, it's kind of the same thing. The first thing we're going to do, though, we're going to clean things up. So I have my bleach right there, and so the first thing I'm going to do, and for those who are in the same situation I am, I'm going to unplug my sewage tank right here where this rag is in here, and I'm going to inject a whole bunch of water in here to dilute everything. And the more water I put in here, eventually it's gonna push everything up to where it can then gravity feed into the city sanitary system. And I'm going to put some bleach water in there and rinse things out really good. I have a cold and hot water spigot right there. So it's really not as bad as it could be. When I bought my sewage tank originally, it had like a black lid on top of this, which prevented me from looking inside to see what's wrong. I eventually put a plexiglass lid, and so I can see what the problem is. So I just have to clean things up, and we'll document this repair. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing, I'm filling my tank with clean water, and basically the more fluid I have in the tank, the more it can push out, and it can start pushing out some of the raw sewage that's down inside here. And I'm going to probably have to let this run for about 15-20 minutes to give it enough volume to push everything out. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. I'm still dumping water into my tank. This setup basically was originally manufactured by the same people who make the little giant pumps. And it was a pretty good system, but had no redundancies. And over the years, I've been in my house now for about 18 years, and I've had all kinds of failures and floods, and it's been real difficult. And so throughout the years, I've added a bunch of redundancies. So like I said, down inside this tank are 2 pumps, and one of the pumps is actually this pump right here. I'm not sure. This pump right here is made by Hallmark Industries, and it is like the very best pump I've found. And let me tell you, I've had several sewage pumps. For one thing, this pump is 1 horsepower, but also will pump 7,250 gallons per hour, which is really, really good. And the lift on this, if I can find out how much this will lift, this thing will lift sewage. Let's see what it says back here. This thing will lift sewage up to 47 feet. And I'm 30 feet down in my basement, so even at about 30 feet, this thing will still lift several thousand gallons at a time. And this pump, I think, is only about $160. So this has been a really good pump. Now, so one of the things I've done, and maybe I can use a picture here. Okay, so this is the outlet of the pump, and what I have a backflow, and I think this is the problem what I have now. So right here, this thing is a backflow. It lets the fluid go up through it, but then it's supposed to stop it from floating back down. Now I have one of these basically sitting on top of this pump, and then another one, as you can see, is sitting right here. So I have two check valves between the pumps and the line up here. So if one pump has to go out, I have another pump that can take over, and if one of these valves go out, well, I have another valve that can also take over. So I'm pretty sure that the valves down here on the pumps are still working, and this is the one that's failing because I can just tell at the amount of time it takes for the sewage to run back into my tank. I don't know if you can understand that, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So this is almost clean, clear water down here. Now you can see, and I'm not trying to be disgusting by any means, but there's this like a waxy white kind of garbage that's down there. That's, some people call that soap scum. It's basically it's detergent, it's grease, it's shampoo, it's all kinds of stuff that has built up over the years. And now that I'm pretty much running a clear liquid into my tank and all the sewage has been diluted, what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch over from cold water to hot water with a spray nozzle, and I'm going to rinse out my tank and get rid of all that scum. I've switched over to hot water and I put a nozzle on here. So I'm going to go ahead, open this up, and I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning all the soap scum from the tank walls and have the pump take this all the way out. It'll just be a little bit easier of a job having a clean tank than a dirty tank. And I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that one. Okay, I'm all done with cleaning off the walls. So I'm going to take the nozzle off and I'm going to switch back to cold water to add the bleach. Now I don't have like a rubber grommet that can combine all these wires into one, so I just have to wrap it with a rag and stuff it into that hole. But what I'm going to do now, just to make it a little bit more pleasant to clean and to tolerate, I'm going to add, I probably have about a quarter bottle. I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of bleach in here. And not only will that kill any germs and such, but it will also get rid of all the smell. And really right now the smell isn't that bad. Probably because a lot of people had their morning showers and they've been doing dishes and they've been doing laundry. So a lot of the sewage has been replaced with gray water, and it probably isn't going to be that bad of a job. Especially if my problem is this, I really don't have to mess around with the tank down inside, but I'm taking all precautions and planning for the worst case scenario. That way it won't be so bad after all. And while this is filling, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to take off, boy, those are really tight. Take off all the bolts holding the lid to the tank. And one thing this is telling me, as stiff as these are, I'm going to have to probably put some anti-seize compound on these. These are supposed to be stainless steel, but obviously these are rusting, so these are not stainless steel bolts. So I'm going to have to make sure stainless steel goes back into place. Okay, I have all the bolts out, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to kill the power to the pumps. And since I have 2 pumps in there, I got to kill both power supplies. So the power's been killed, time to turn off the water. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this very well, but so this is filled back up to the top, and so what it was doing, it was just pumping this all the way down, going back up, pumping down. It was just going through this cycle for the last, I guess, last 6 or 7 hours. Now this line right here is just a condensate line from an air conditioning unit, so we're going to just put that by the side. And now it's time to put on the long gloves, the best invention ever made. These gloves almost make you feel invincible. And these go all the way past my elbows, and it makes this job a little bit more easy to tolerate. So we're going to go ahead, and this is just a really tight fitting here, so we're just going to move this back and forth until it comes up, just like that. And then we're just going to rotate this over, pull all the wires out, so we have access now to the tank. And as you can see, this it's pretty much clear water. It's all the sewage is gone, and I've asked everyone upstairs not to use the toilets or the sinks or anything else to maintain my morale. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take my hose off my water supply here, and I have this little handy dandy little submergible pump, and we're going to attach the hose to this. Now, when I was building my house, you had to be 300 feet away from a sewer line to go to a septic system, and so I wasn't able to put a septic system in to my house, and thus so I had to inject my sewage. But I do have an emergency drain right down here that goes out to like a leaching field. So I'm going to put that all the way down there. Then I'm going to take the other hose end here. It's kind of like a fridge drain. I'm going to put that back inside there. And I'm going to plug this pump in. So this drain, just right down here, goes into another reservoir system that's outside in the backyard. So I'm going to drain the contents now, which is mostly water, into that containment area, and I'll take care of that later. You can also use this to rinse things down. I could call a plumber on this job, but I think they'd charge me a whole lot of money, and the plumber would have to get used to what I'm doing here, because this is a little bit kind of different from what they may be used to. and I can smell that bleach water, and that's all I can really smell is the bleach water. So it's really not as bad as you may think. No gag reflexes. Okay, that's as far down as that pump's going to go. Then we're going to take the pump out. So, as you can see down here, this is, I have a pump here, then I have a pump here. This is that pump made by Hallmark. This pump right here was actually a pump I picked up from Harbor Freight, and it could hardly pump the sewage high enough. It took a long time for this Harbor Freight pump to do its job. This pump right here does it really, really quick. And so you can see that I have a backflow valve here and a backflow valve here, and all the couplings, I don't use unions because they're just too hard to mess with. So I just have these slip couplings that make everything really easy to take apart. And of course you can see that there's a float here, there's a float here. So this float right here with the Hallmark pump is my primary pump. If the Hallmark pump happens to fail, then I have this pump here at a higher elevation to be my backup pump. So I basically have redundancies in just about every system that there is. Now another thing I have, as you can see right here, is I have a sprinkler head here, I have a sprinkler head here, and I have a sprinkler head back here. And I have a system right here where I have some cold water coming in here. Let me see if I can get some more light on the subject here. I have cold water coming in here with a ball valve, and I have hot water coming in here with a ball valve, and I have a check valve here and a check valve here. So together they mix in here. So I have a solenoid here and a solenoid here. These are both 120 volt solenoids, 1/2-inch pipe thread. And then I have a timer here and a timer here. So this timer goes to this valve, this solenoid. This timer goes to this solenoid. And I have these timers set at 12 o'clock noon and 12 o'clock midnight for 10 minutes. And so at noon and at midnight, these timers will open the valves, and I have redundancy just in case one fails or doesn't close properly, the other one will. So at midnight and at noon, these will open up, and then I have water that will come streaming through this hose down to my sprinkler heads, and so this will wash down all the soap scum and stuff every 12 hours to help keep my tank clean. Now, I don't know if you know much about sewage tanks, but if you were to compare my tank against others, this is a lot better than other people's sewage tanks, because you get that kind of that waxy, soapy scum that'll build up on the walls. And not only can it build up on the walls, but that scum can also build up on your floats and can actually make it heavy enough that your floats may not work, and then you're going to give yourself a flooding situation. So now up here where my work lamp is, I have to move this lamp here. Okay, so I have this valve. This valve is a mechanical valve, and I'm going to go ahead and shut this, and this will keep any sewage between here and the sanitary sewer outside from flowing back into my tank, and that could be a real big mess. Now, if you happen to have anything like this, or you ever put something like this into your home, remember to kill your pumps, because the pumps down here are so strong that if you have the valve up here closed and your pumps happen to turn on accidentally or whatever, you're going to have so much back pressure in these pipes that these things could actually burst, and then it's going to be a real big mess. So I will actually unplug my pumps just to make sure that that does not happen, because it's happened in the past, and I hate to say it, but I had to learn the hard way. Okay, so we're going to take this off, and if I'm correct that this is bad, when I open and separate these pipes, I shouldn't get any surprises, because everything from up here in this valve down has already flowed out. And that's the reason why I have this secondary containment, is just in case it overflows, I have other things to work with. So we're going to move this straight up, going to move this piece down, back and forth, to take this check valve out. And I'm going to have to get a flashlight here. Okay, so this is my backflow valve, and if you can see down here is the light. You can see that the little flapper inside has failed, and I'm not sure if it's totally ripped out or what the problem is down here. Let's see if I can find it. So I don't know if you can see if I can get this seen in here, but there's a rubber gasket like a flapper, and then inside there is supposed to be a plastic backing plate, and that plastic backing plate is broken in two. So the rubber flapper wasn't receiving any support, and so that is the problem. It's a really simple problem to take care of. And this is a new one, and you can see down inside this one piece. I really need to come up with a program for my house to replace these probably every year, because I just let it go. If it's working, no problem, but when it breaks down, then it's a big problem. So we're going to go ahead and replace this one, and things should be good. I'm glad it's not the valves down there in here. These pumps are about 40 pounds a piece, and they're a real pain to try to lift out. But this I can live with, and it also shows the direction of flow. So if you ever have to use one of these, do not put it in backwards. You'll get the back pressure and it'll blow your system out. So we're just going to go ahead and put this back into place. We're going to have to loosen these up. Loosen these O-ring, these clamps up. And if you ever use these, make sure you get stainless steel clamps. They're good quality so they don't rust out on you. So we're going to take this one off. And I have a little marking line right here, so I know exactly how far to push this up. And if I can get this wet just a little bit, it'll be a little bit easier to work with. Okay. So this will be easier to put on now that they're wet. Oh, this is really a tight fit. These long gloves, I picked those up from Amazon. These are about $8 a piece, and they're a wonderful thing to have. Okay. I have to make sure I get up to my reference mark, so I have the same amount of material on both sides of my check valve. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you about what I've done. You can't really see it, But down inside of here, on the bottom of my tank, I have a 1/4-inch piece of polycarbonate, otherwise known as Lexan. I put that piece of plastic down there because, you know, over time those pumps vibrate and they shift and they move, and what I didn't want to happen would be to eventually wear a hole into the bottom of my tank. So I put that extra piece of plastic down there and set the pumps on top so that wouldn't happen. That was just something was good to do, because that's what I was afraid of would happen over the long run. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so I'm up at my reference mark up here. So I can go ahead and tighten this one down. Tighten this one down. My worst thoughts is having this go out on vacation when no one's here. Okay, I got the top on, so I can bring this back down, line this up, and then I can tighten these bottom clamps. Okay, everything is nice and tight. So I'm going to open my valve, and you'll hear the fluid, the water up above here come down and hit that valve. Or not. Okay. So the next thing is to do is to go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and fill up the tank again and let it cycle several times and see if there's any problems with it. I hooked my hose back up to the cold water supply. So that's in there. I need to plug my pumps back in. That one's plugged in, and the secondary plug. And another thing I've done, so okay, both pumps are plugged back in, and I have the plugs on different circuit breakers. So if one were to go bad, the other one takes up in its place. That's just part of the redundancy I'm using here. Okay, so let's turn on the cold water. Okay, my valve up here is open. That's very important, so I don't get a sudden amount of back pressure. And my arrow here showing flow direction is pointing up, and that's exactly what it should be doing there. It's still filling. Right now my pumps are submerged. I have my primary pump. I adjusted the float on my primary pump to kick in just when my pumps are submerged. And my secondary pump should kick in right before it gets to my emergency overflow. Okay, so my secondary pump has kicked in. I'm going to turn off the water here because that pump doesn't pump as well. And my secondary pump, as I told you, I picked it up from Harbor Freight. It does a so-so job. I'm not real happy with it. That's why I bought another pump to take its place. Now I don't see the water level dropping. So I have a feeling that the harbor freight pump may be just cavitating because of that air pocket that's up inside. In fact, it looks like it is cavitating because the water is not dropping. Yep, still cavitating. Nothing's working, so I'm going to have to plug my primary pump back in. And as you can see, my primary pump does a pretty good job. And I heard something rattling around. I have a feeling that those plastic pieces that were broken off may be down inside my harbor freight pump. So now that one's working. My primary pump is working. Where the sewage comes into my tank, I have a street elbow on here. And when times like this happen, I got a cap so I can actually cap this off to keep unwanted water from coming in here. Because I'm going to have to pull this pump out because I'm pretty sure that the pieces from my backflow valve are down inside the harbor freight pump, and it's probably keeping the harbor freight pump impeller from turning properly. So I'm going to have to pull that pump, and that's going to be another pain in my rear to do that. So I'm almost back to the beginning. I'm going to have to take this valve off again in order to get that pump underneath. So I got to separate this pipe joint to be able to pull the pump up from down below. Now I have the valve up above closed, but because this backflow is doing its job now, when I open this up, I'm probably going to get about a quart or so of liquid coming down on me. Just want to try to control it as much as I can. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Ah, there we go. Okay. So this has to come all the way off. Put that to the side. You can kind of see now, this is this one complete unit. So if I loosen those flexible couplings down there, I should be able to lift that up. Since I'm going to be bending over, this is a good time to take my cell phone out of my shirt. Okay, so that's separated. And this is my primary pump. See if it'll stay put right there. And sure enough, I can fill up underneath there the plastic pieces from that pump, from the backflow valve. So I'm not sure if I can get them out as easy as they got in. I think they're bigger. My wife must be up. She's flushing the toilet right now. That's why I have that valve on down there. Okay, so I had to go up and get some tools and reach up in there to try to get that piece. It's just so close and yet so far away. problem is the intake on this is smaller than the outlet, and the outlet, it fell right through this section here, which is kind of interesting because how did it get past that valve? I'm going to probably check that out while I'm here too. Okay, so this is a piece, this is part of my backflow valve that fell back down in here and caused me a bunch of grief, but now I'm worried that the valve up in here, yep, that was I'm afraid of. Let me get the light in here. So my problem here is the flapper in that one is gone. So I had two of these valves fail. So I need to replace another valve. I only have one backup. So it looks like off to off to Home Depot I go to get me two replacements and then a spare. So I'm glad I caught this, because if I didn't catch this, it would just sit there and cycle and cycle and cycle inside the tank, and I'd be really upset. So you can see that has failed altogether. So the one up in here failed, the one down in my pump failed. So I guess while I'm at it, I should go check that one down there and see if it's bad. Okay, so I pulled off the top on this other one, and you can see that this is still carrying water, so it's holding. And here's the other piece. So this is the this is a piece from my upper valve that has failed. This probably wasn't sucked in because this is bigger than the opening of the pump. So all sorts of fun things are happening in my life today. So off to Home Depot. Back from Home Depot, instead of just getting one, I ended up buying 4 backflow valves, thinking that if one went bad, actually the two went bad, what's the possibility of that one down there going bad shortly thereafter? So I'm going to replace them all, whether they need it or not. And then I can mark the calendar. So take a look at that. Goes all the way through. I can mark my calendar that on this date I replaced them all. That way I can kind of keep track to see how many months or years these valves will last. These are made by Everbuilt, and my guess these things only last about 3 years. It seems like I'm down here about that often to repeat this dance. And one of these days I'm going to actually make this little area into an enclosed room with a workbench. So this will be a lot easier task. So you might have thought, well, why do I have all these valves and fittings down inside the tank? Why not just run the pipes up through the lid and put all the valves and fittings up here? Well, I had it that way once before, and then one of these valves actually bust open at the seams and sprayed the whole room with raw sewage. So everything is down inside of here to contain a possible rupture. I have looked around this section of ABS pipe and I cannot find my vent hole, so I'm going to have to make a new one. If a vent hole is not put in here, then what's going to happen is when these are put back into the water, there's going to be an air pocket in here. The air has to be able to escape through this vent hole and allow the water to come up. Okay, this is my good valve, and I mean all the pieces are still in there, but you never know when this could fail. It could fail tomorrow. So we're going to replace that one too. Okay, I have two new backflow valves on each of my pumps, and things look good. I got plenty of clearance for my floats, so it looks like it's about time for me to button everything up. I just want to make sure everything's lined up and down here. Looks like it is. And okay, we have everything buttoned back up. We have all new backflow valves down on the pumps and on our main line. Our valve up here is open. The next thing we need to do is test it, so we're going to fill this full of cold water. And we want to unplug the primary pump and just plug in the secondary pump. That was the one that wasn't working, but now that we have pulled all the broken valve pieces out of the valves, the one-way valves, hopefully it will do what it's supposed to do. The worst part about this right now is I got sweat dripping down my face and I can't wipe it away with my hands because my hands are all disgusting. Well, my gloves are disgusting, so I'll just have to grin and bear it. Okay, the water level is coming up and it's going to hit that float here just about any minute now. And there goes the secondary pump. And it is taking it down, but very, very slowly. That's why I need to replace that pump out. The pump would probably drain faster if I stopped filling the tank up. Okay, so the tank has been drained on the secondary pump. So I'm going to fill this back up and make sure the primary pump is working. The tank is filled again. This is the primary pump. And that works really good. Okay, we're back to normal again. So all the emergencies are over. I just have to gather my wires here, wrap up my hoses, and dry everything out. I spilled a lot of water. Okay, now one other thing I want to show you, kind of, these end pieces of wire, you can see these two end pieces of wire. The reason these are a little bit like in the shape of a Y, these are actually probes that go to a wet alarm system. So I have these wires running up to the house inside the kitchen, and if moisture gets in these wires and makes a contact between the two ends here, there's an alarm, somewhat like a smoke alarm, that will sound upstairs. So when this is in use, I'll put one of these on top of the lid to the tank, and one of these will go down inside the secondary containment. So if there's a leak or an overflow or anything else like that, the alarm will go off. Well, the problem is I can't put these into service right now because I got water in my secondary containment tank. I got water on top of my lid, and so these would go off prematurely. So I'll have to come back down here and dry everything out to get this back to normal. Now the secondary containment tank that you can see right here, this used to be an old laundry basket made out of fiberglass. And so I plugged up the 4 holes in the corners where the casters, the wheels for it once was. And so this is another secondary redundancy that I have in case something happens to this. So as a quick review, I have a 40-gallon tank here for my sewage. Inside I have 2 sewage pumps with floats set at different levels for primary and secondary. Right on top of that I have backflow valves, and then that comes into a Y, and then I have a backflow valve here, and then I have a valve up higher, and this is basically for redundancy. So if one pump fails, it'll continue to go. That's the only problem I have about this house. I love this house. It took me quite a while to build it, and I'm still building it. But if I could do this all over again, what I probably would have done, and since I have 3 levels to this house, and the 2 lower levels are 8-foot ceilings, if I would have done 10-foot ceilings, that would have raised the house another 4 feet, and at least at that elevation I could have gravity flowed the main level, the ground level, into the sanitary sewer system, and then I just would have to inject the next 2 levels. So I don't know if you're one of the unfortunate individuals that have to pump their sewage. If you are, you can probably sympathize with me on the hassles it is to have to do this. But it is what it is. I'll just have to maintain this a little bit better and swap out the pumps every 5 years or so, and these valves I'll probably have to swap out maybe every year so I don't have a repeat performance of today's activity. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like and subscribe if needed. And just remember, playing with sewage is a real crappy job. I had to throw that in there. Pretty bad joke.